Okay, section 4.2.RA-6, we're going to consider the data set given in the accompanying table. We're going to complete parts A through D. The values of x are -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. The values for y are -3, -2, 0, 2, and 5. In part A, we want to determine the least squares regression line. So we're going to use StatCrunch to be able to do that. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to select our table here. So you click on the table. We're going to open this table up in StatCrunch. Okay, so now in StatCrunch we have our information. We have our x column, our y column. And so now what we want to do again is we want to find the least squares regression line. So we're going to go ahead and select Stat and then scroll all the way down to Regression and then select Simple Linear. Now once we do that, we're going to let our x variable represent x. We're going to let our y variable represent y. And then we just need to select Compute at this point. Okay, and then you can see here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy that. You can see here that we have our data here. So we have our results. So let's take a look at that. So here we have an equation. We have y, which is equal to 0.4 plus 2x, where the dependent variable or the response variable is y, the independent variable, which is the explanatory variable, is x, and therefore there is our equation. So therefore, with using StatCrunch, we can say that the least squares regression line is y, which is equal to 2.0x plus 0.4. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to graph the least squares regression line on the scatter diagram. Okay, well, we can already see that from StatCrunch. Let's go ahead and open that up again. So here's StatCrunch. Now, if we scroll here to the next page, I'm going to open this up, make this a little bit bigger. If we scroll to the next page, we can see that we already have the data here, and the line is already graphed with our scatter diagram. Now, what we want to do is we may want to match our multiple choice answers on this question. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that graph would look like. So here is the solution. And I want to point out that the x goes from -3 to 3. So let's go ahead and put in our minimum value. So that for the x, we have a minimum of -3. We have a maximum of 3. And then we'll select OK. So now we go from -3 to 3. And then we're going to create our y minimum value. So the minimum, you can see down here, is -6. And then our maximum is 6. And then select OK. And so now we can match our graph with our solution. So let me go ahead and copy this. So here is our graph. Okay, and so we can match that with our answer. Just remember here that we have the x and y axis, which goes through the origin. So we have, let me draw a better line here. So we have a line that goes from our origin, which goes through here. That's our x-axis. And then we have our y-axis. So you can see how this graph matches this graph over here. Okay, next. In part C, it says the equation of the line containing the points -2, -3, and 2, 5 is y is equal to 2.00x plus 1.0. We want to be able to compute the sum of the squared residuals of the given data set for this line. Now, we can do this by hand, which is going to take some time, or we can just use StatCrunch to be able to do this. So let's go ahead and click on StatCrunch with our data. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the graph. Okay, and now over here, what I want you to pay attention to, okay, is we have our column that has x, okay, and then we have our column which represents y. And so then we have a line that represents the equation of y is equal to 2x plus 1.0. So what we want to do is we want to first find a column in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to plug in each value of x so we can create an expression and put it into this column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the column here, and then I'm going to select data. And as I go select data, I'm going to go all the way down where it says compute. And then I'm going to select expression. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build an expression by putting this equation in here. So we're going to select build. Okay, and then up here, we're going to put the number 2, and then we're going to select multiply. We're going to multiply by the variable x, and so the column that we want it to represent is x. So we got to select column. So make sure when you select it, it's up here. And then we're going to add where it says plus, you're going to add 1. Okay, and then we're going to select, let me put this up here a little more. Then I'm going to select OK. Now, what I'm going to call this is I'm going to call this the predicted value. And that's the predicted value for y. Okay, so let's go ahead and select compute. So now we can see that we have these numbers. So imagine that if we plugged in -2 in for x, 2 times -2 is -4, plus 1 gives us -3. Okay, then if we plugged in -1, 2 times -1 is -2, plus 1 gives us -1. So this gives us a quicker way of being able to get this data. Okay, now what we want to do, okay, is we want to take our predicted value. Okay, so we want to take our y here and we want to subtract this predicted value. Now we can still do this by hand if we wanted to, but again, we can put in this expression if we have more data. So again, now that we highlighted this column, we're going to select data and then go ahead and do this again by selecting expression. Okay, so now what is the expression? We're going to build this expression. So we can easily do that by picking what we've already created in our columns. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the y and select it, and then we're going to subtract the predicted value. So let's go ahead and select that. Now our formula is already in there. Okay, and then we're going to select OK. And so what we call that is the residuals. So that is the residual. So now we're going to select compute. So when we compute, okay, if we take -3 and we subtracted -3, we'd get 0. If we take -2 and subtract -1, we get -1. So again, our StatCrunch is doing this for us. Now we have one more column to represent. So we're going to go ahead and select the last column here. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and go to the data, and then we're going to go to compute, and then we're going to go to expression. And now we're going to go ahead and build an expression. And so now the last thing that we want to do is we want to take the residuals. So we're going to select residuals, and then we're going to square it. So in order to square it, we have to raise this as an exponent. So you see this up arrow key? We're going to select the up arrow key, and then we're going to square it. And then we're going to select OK. And then what we're going to title this is the residuals and what we can do is we can write the same thing with an up arrow squared. So now if we take a look at that, okay, if we take the number 0 and square it, we'd get 0. If we take number -1 and square it, we get 1. We get -1 squared and then 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and find out what this looks like. Okay, now here this should match what we have in StatCrunch. Okay, so we should see here x, y, here's the predicted value, right? There's our residual 0, -1, -1, -1, 0. And then there's our residual squared 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. Okay, now our question is, they want us to be able to compute the sum of the squared residuals of this data. Well, this is the residuals, right? This is the column. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to add those up. So when we add those up, we're going to add each one of those up. We get 0 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 0, and then we get 3.0000. So now we've answered our question. We can say that the sum of the squared residuals for the line containing the points -2, -3, and 2, 5 is 3.0000. Okay, now let's take a look at part D. Part D, it says compute the sum of the squared residuals of the given data set for the least squares regression line that we found in part A. And we're going to use the equation of the least squares regression line where y was equal to 2.0x plus 0.4. Okay, so let's go ahead and then open that up in StatCrunch. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and then we're going to delete these columns. Okay, and now we're going to start over. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use a new equation, which we have right here. Okay, so again, we're going to select the column here. We're going to go to data and then select compute and then select expression. And then we're going to build an expression. Now remember, the expression we're going to build here is now this equation. So we have 2 times the value of x. Okay, and then we're going to have plus 0.4. So it's going to be 0.4. Okay, and then we're going to select OK. And then what we're going to call this is the predicted value of y. Okay, so again, there is our value. So we plugged in -2, and then it gave us these values. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and go to the next column. We're going to go ahead and select data and go to compute and then select expression. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to build a new expression. We're going to find the residuals. Now remember, to find the residuals, the formula is to take the value of y and then we're going to subtract the predicted value of y. Okay, and then we're going to select OK, and then we're going to call this the residuals. And then we're going to compute. And now we have our information there. Okay, and so now we're going to go ahead and then square those residuals. So we're going to select column 5. Again, go to data. We're going to go ahead and select compute and then select expression. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take the residuals and then we're going to use the up arrow key and then square it. And then select OK. And then we're going to call this residuals. And then we'll call it residuals squared. And then there's our values. Okay, so let me put the table in here so we can compare what that table actually is. So let's take a look. Okay, so here's our residuals squared. 0.36, 0.16, 0.16, 0.16, 0.36. We can see that this column matches and that this column matches. So therefore, there is our information using StatCrunch. Okay, and now what's the next thing that we need to do? Well, we need to add this column here. So we need to add the column here. And when we add the residuals column, we get the following number. We get the number 1.20. So therefore, the sum of the squared residuals for the least squares regression line is 1.20.